So Destiny, I have responded to I think I made 1 or 2 videos responding to some of the stuff he said about veganism. He's a Twitch streamer. He also does some like debating, quote unquote, where he talks to, people on the internet. I think he talks to a lot of alt-writers and apparently does a pretty good job with that whole thing. I don't know. I haven't watched any of those, but he also debates, quote unquote, vegans, but doesn't do a very good job, which might be why he has decided to no longer debate vegans. Many of you know that I am sympathetic to non-vegans. I know that it is not easy to go vegan. We are surrounded by convenience, convenient animal products and advertising, obviously making these products look super, super delicious. And to a lot of people, they are super, super delicious. And often there aren't that many plant-based options, or if they are, they're quite expensive. Of course, you can live on rice and beans and spend very little, but I don't think many people want to do that. Look, most vegans don't want to do that. I don't do that. Things are much better than they used to be, but there are still many places where it's difficult to find a nutritious and filling vegan meal. And sometimes it's just about taste, like I said. And that, that can be challenging for people if you really, really like meat or whatever, particularly if you don't like beans. If you don't like beans, you're going to have a pretty hard time staying vegan and being healthy on a vegan diet, unless you really like mock meats like I do and can afford to purchase them and eat them a lot. So again, I'm sympathetic. However, there is a big difference between being a non-vegan and recognizing that, what you're doing is harmful, does have harmful consequences, that we're flawed people, we're flawed human beings who are, working toward doing better, right? And doing what Destiny does, which is rationalizing and defending his choices by denying that they cause any harm. Destiny's argument basically is that instead of going vegan, or, essentially that it doesn't matter so much that he's not vegan, what's important is voting to end animal agriculture.
Yeah, but I don't know if I think that I platformed enough vegan arguments that if you want to go vegan, you've seen the arguments and ideas for it. I think I've actually made a lot of people in my audience go vegan. But personally, food and all of that is a really big part of my life, and I'll vote for policies for it. I'll advocate for people to vote for policies for it, but it's a big sacrifice for me personally to give up meat.
First, kind of ridiculous that he wants to enforce this on everyone else via the government, something that he's not willing to do himself. And second, is this actually realistic? There are no ballot measures to end animal agriculture. There are a few in various states to improve animal welfare in tiny, tiny, tiny ways, and those are important. But the real power that we have right now is via our dollar, is by purchasing plant-based options and not purchasing animal-based options. It's not ideal. It is far from ideal, but it's the best that we have right now. And while in some countries there may be significant measures that citizens can vote for, like taxing meat based on emissions, we're nowhere near that in the US, and Destiny is in the US. In the US, there is little difference in terms of support for farm subsidies between the two parties. Many Democrats are all about subsidies to farmers. Bernie Sanders, for instance, is Mr. Dairy Industry. Cool. The only real distinction is that some Democrats support smaller farms, which ironically can actually be worse for the environment. And there's no evidence that these farms result in better welfare. So if you're voting in the US, not only does your vote probably either not count or barely count due to districting and the Electoral College, but even if you are in a location where your vote does count, your choices are between two pro-animal agriculture parties. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote. There are other policies that Republicans support that are literal crimes against humanity. I have no doubt that this period is going to be recorded as one of the most shameful in American history. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you are voting vegan, by voting for Democrats in any substantive way. Again, the only real way to vote vegan today is with your dollar. But let's imagine that this weren't true. Let's imagine that there was actually a measure to end animal agriculture and it actually had a chance of passing. Maybe even that Destiny's vote could be the one to swing it. Would he vote for it? It's easy to say that you'd vote vegan when there's no chance of that happening. But again, if it were actually on the ballot, if it were actually possible that Destiny would not be able to eat meat again, tomorrow, would he actually vote for that? I have a really hard time believing that someone who loves meat so much that says that they would suffer without meat,
and I would like be suffering like quite a bit to like give up meat,
would actually vote for that. In order to rely on people voting against animal agriculture, I don't think we need them to be vegan, but I do think that we need them to be reducetarian, right? We need them to be people who can imagine themselves going vegan someday, right? Imagine themselves eating less and less animal products. That's not destiny. Again, the way he puts it, meat is an integral part of his life. He will suffer without eating animal products. Why should we believe him when he says that he will vote vegan? He may believe that. He may believe that he'll vote that way. But to me, it's about as meaningful as people answering the trolley problem by saying that they'd sacrifice themselves by jumping in front of the train. It's silly and it's a distraction from the issue. So like I said, the main power that we have today is by voting with our dollar, and Destiny denies this.
So like my overall impact on like animal agriculture is going to be like really, really, really small if I personally just become a vegan.
If 1 million people eat one fewer animal each, then that's 1 million lives saved, and each person shares 1/1,000,000th of the credit of that impact, right? So each person on average saves one animal. We don't seem to have trouble understanding shared culpability when it comes to something like a stoning, right? Or a mob of people are murdering somebody, right? No one is innocent. Each person is responsible. No one person is responsible. So why do we have such a hard time when it comes to what we buy and the consequences of what we buy? The caller who Destiny is talking to in the video makes the analogy to Destiny's opposition to transphobic jokes. You could say that one person not making transphobic jokes or slurs or whatever makes no difference, right, to the overall culture of transphobia, so why stop? Destiny's response is that a transphobic comment directly hurts somebody, whereas buying meat does not.
By doing that, I think that I can cause like a measurable harm like right there that I like directly care about. Like that would be like a bad thing right there. Like I would directly be engaging in either the direct harm of those people or leading like pretty directly to it.
So the first problem is that it does make a difference, but it's one of probability. If you buy one package of bacon, that doesn't mean that the grocery store that you bought it from like automatically purchases one more package of bacon and that like, one more pig is killed. Instead, there's a tipping point. If you buy a package of bacon, there is a certain probability that the, manager of the butcher part, the meat person, whatever the hell you call those people, there's a certain probability that he or she will say, hey, we keep selling out of bacon early. Maybe we should go ahead and order an extra case. And if you don't buy that bacon, there is a certain probability that the manager will say something like, hey, we're throwing out a lot of bacon. People aren't buying as much bacon anymore. Maybe we should order one fewer case. It's a question of profit and loss, and profit margins in grocery stores are razor thin. Most grocery stores aren't run by infallible computer programs that keep track of all that, so there's also a probability of the manager noticing that they're selling out versus throwing out more than is economical. But that ultimately fits into the probability too. What we're talking about is hundreds of people going vegan and ultimately one person being responsible for one fewer case of bacon being ordered. With every consumer action, we're talking about a small chance of making a much larger difference. The same is true of the stoning, right? There is a point in the stoning where one more rock made the difference between the person dying or not dying. If you're throwing rocks early on, you cause some bruising. If you're throwing rocks later on, the person's already going to die from, kidney failure or whatever due to the accumulated injury. There was one single rock that crossed that threshold from something the person could have lived from to something the person is going to die from. In either case, we're talking about a small chance of making a big difference. Now, obviously, we don't blame that one person, the person who threw the rock, right, for the murder and just leave, everyone else is innocent. Everyone else who threw a rock is innocent. There was no way to know ahead of time which rock would ultimately kill the person being stoned. In the same way, the vegan who acts as the tipping point to do something massive, like causing a company to shut down a factory farm because they've been in the red for too long, doesn't get all of the credit for the millions of lives saved. Because the actual effects are unknown, the credit or blame is shared, which means when you eat one fewer animal, you save one animal. And the same is true for the example that Destiny used to rationalize the difference. When someone uses a transphobic slur or tells a transphobic joke, harm is not guaranteed. There's a certain probability that somebody who doesn't agree with that will hear it, and there's even a certain probability that a trans person will hear it and be hurt by it. But there's also a probability that a trans person will hear it and won't be hurt by it. There's also a certain probability that this will be the tipping point and lead to someone's suicide. You don't know the actual effects, not when making a bigoted joke and not when buying bacon, but you do know the statistical effects, and in both cases, they are bad. Because our knowledge is imperfect, all that we can do as people who want to do good, who want to be ethical, is go by probability of harm. And that's just as true for a bigoted joke or a slur as it is for buying bacon. So this is when it gets super funny. Destiny basically claims to have done so much for veganism that he doesn't have to go vegan because he has platformed so many vegans by debating them on his channel. And that so many of his viewers have gone vegan because of that.
I think that like I platformed enough vegan arguments that like if you want to go vegan, you've seen the arguments and ideas for it. I think I've actually made a lot of people in my audience go vegan.
You know, everyone hates a hypocrite, but I think even worse than that is a hypocrite who claims other people's virtue, their moral virtue, as their own. This is what Destiny is doing. Let's say that I convince Bob to go vegan. Well, now I can eat meat. It all cancels out because I convinced Bob to go vegan. It's the same as me being vegan and Bob continuing to eat animal products. But as for Bob, sorry Bob, all of the credit for you being vegan goes to me because I'm taking it because I convinced you to go vegan. I've stolen Bob's virtue because he is still responsible for the death of every single animal that I eat because I only justified not going vegan because he went vegan. Now, there are cases where this could actually work. You know, let's say that Bob does not care about animals, does not care about the environment, does not care about human beings. He would never go vegan in a million years. But I'm like, hey, I will pay you $1,000 a month to go vegan. That's legit. Bob didn't go vegan for any ethical reason. He is only vegan because I am paying him. He gets no credit for that. He knows he gets no credit for that. I'm not stealing his virtue because he has none. The problem is that in Destiny's case, it's not the second example, it's the first one. He's not paying psychopaths to go vegan. He's leeching off the virtue of his viewers as an excuse not to go vegan. You can't convince people to be vegan because it's the right thing to do and then take all of the credit for their choice to do so. They aren't going vegan so that you can continue to eat animal products and feel good about it. They're going vegan to address their own harm footprints, not yours. It's absolutely a good thing to educate others and to help them change their habits, and people will thank you for it. And I'm sure that Destiny platforming these vegans has encouraged people who follow him, who watch his stuff, to go vegan themselves. And that's great, but you can't then use their virtue as justification to do harm because they did good. It's a lot more complicated than that. And let's be real here. If anyone deserves credit for, convincing these viewers to go vegan, it's the people who are debating against Destiny. It's the vegans who are debating against Destiny, not Destiny for having and losing these debates. He's not losing these debates on purpose, right? And he's not having these debates for free out of the goodness of his heart. He is making money doing this. And if he's being honest about it, he doesn't think he's lost these debates. Otherwise he would concede defeat and stop justifying his meat consumption. So that's it really. Again, I am sympathetic, but I'm much less sympathetic when people are making arguments like this. Destiny is not stupid. I think he is being defensive and he doesn't want to admit that what he's doing is incredibly harmful. Because who wants to admit that, right? There's nothing unique to this. This is why we continue to see this, because no one wants to admit that about themselves. And I get that people are really, really, really tied to food. I'm not going to say that. I think it's kind of sad. I mean, it's fucking food. There's lots of tasty food out there. Your taste buds will change. You can at least try for a short period of time. I know he said that the mock meats are terrible. I recognize that a lot of them are for a lot of people. I'm not going to pretend that tofurkey kielbasa is good. I love it, but I realize that I have really weird tastes. And also, I've never been a huge fan of meat. I think this is pretty common for people who go vegetarian or vegan. A lot of us were never big meat eaters, certainly when it comes to like red meat, stuff like that. But it's definitely worth a try for anyone in the privileged position to be able to do it, to be able to reduce their meat consumption. I think it's worth a try to at least see if your taste buds can change enough that you can eat less animal products without it being such a sacrifice. Particularly for Destiny, as he says, you know, he has all of this influence. Well, it would be hugely influential for him to kind of practice what he preaches, you know, and again, he's saying that it doesn't really matter, but he does recognize that animal agriculture is bad. I think it would be hugely influential if he were supporting that less and less. And again, if voting matters so much, then it's really important, I think, that he put himself in a position psychologically to, again, imagine himself not eating animal products, right? It's the only way realistically, I think, that he would actually vote to end animal agriculture. And also support clean meat initiatives. You know, I mean, look, if you really love meat that much, then he should be one of the biggest proponents of getting clean meat off the ground and actually making it a thing. And maybe he is. I don't know. You know, again, I don't like watch his channel regularly, so he might be. And there's also offsetting. You know, look, it does make a difference. I know that on a personal level, we don't like it. It can be a lot easier if you have the money to just throw money at something, right? Than to actually make, you know, personal sacrifices and personal changes in your life by giving up animal products, for instance. But there's no denying that it makes a difference, right? And so if you are, let's say you struggled with vegan, you actually tried vegan and it didn't work for you for health reasons, or you're like Destiny and you just want to continue eating animal products because they're tasty, in either case, giving money to effective animal charities makes a difference. And of course, if you're already vegan, you can still do that, right? Like, you know, we give money to effective animal charities every single year. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe, that's cool. Support the channel, patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. And I will have a new video very soon. Ah, shnikes.